The pregnancy test sat on the marble bathroom counter, two pink lines staring back at a girl who'd been publicly humiliated just 3 weeks ago, and the baby growing inside her belonged to the one man in Lagos whose family would kill to keep her silent. Chioma Okafor pressed her trembling fingers against her flat stomach, knowing that somewhere in the sprawling Ikoyi mansion above her servant quarters, the dying billionaire's son who'd gotten her pregnant was probably planning how to make her disappear. She was 22 years old, daughter of a deceased palm wine tapper from Ajegunle, currently working as a housemaid in the Adeleke family compound, and she was carrying what could be worth billions of naira if anyone ever found out. But 3 weeks ago, she'd been something else entirely. 3 weeks ago, she'd almost become Chief Oladapo Adeleke's sixth wife. The memory still burned like fresh pepper in her eyes. If you enjoy thrilling African stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and tell us where you are watching from. Your support means the world to us. Chief Oladapo Adeleke was 73 years old when he decided he needed one more wife. Not for love, not for companionship, not even for the pleasure that his failing body could barely remember. He needed a wife because his 5 previous wives had given him 12 daughters and not a single son. And his doctor had just told him he had maybe 6 months before the cancer eating through his liver finished its job. 6 months to secure a legacy. 6 months to produce a male heir who could inherit the Adeleke empire. 4 hotels across Lagos and Abuja, a controlling stake in 3 oil blocks in the Niger Delta, the largest privately owned real estate portfolio in Victoria Island, and a net worth that Forbes estimated at $420 million. His lawyer, Mr. Babatunde Williams, had tried to suggest alternatives during their meeting in the chief's private study overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. "Sir, we can structure the inheritance through a trust. Your daughters can manage." "My daughters." Chief Adeleke's laugh turned into a cough that shook his skeletal frame. "Ngozi is 41 years old, and her husband has already gone through the 50 million naira I gave them for that shopping mall in Lekki. Fulake's boyfriend convinced her to invest in cryptocurrency. Do you know how much she lost? 78 million naira. Disappeared like smoke. Yetunde is on her 3rd marriage. Bimpe hasn't spoken to me in 4 years because I refused to fund her gospel music career. Should I continue?" Williams shifted uncomfortably in his Italian leather chair. "The wives, then. Perhaps the wives hate each other more than they could ever hate me." Chief Adeleke stared at the family portrait on his wall, 12 daughters arranged like a choir, 5 women who couldn't stand in the same room without his security team present. "The moment I close my eyes for the last time, this family will tear itself apart fighting over money. But a son, a male heir. In our tradition, in our culture, a son changes everything." "You want to marry again at 73 while undergoing cancer treatment?" "I want to make sure that when I die, something of me continues. Not just money, not just buildings with my name. Me, my blood, my name carried forward by a son." The chief's hand trembled as he lifted his glass of freshly pressed zobo juice. "Find me a girl, young, healthy, from a good family that's fallen on hard times, someone who'll be grateful, someone who won't ask questions." What the chief didn't say, what he kept locked behind his calculated smile, was that he'd already tried this plan once before, twice actually. His 5th wife, Amara, had been that girl 7 years ago, 19 years old, daughter of a bankrupt trader, desperate enough to marry a man 53 years her senior. She'd gotten pregnant within 4 months. The chief had thrown the biggest party Victoria Island had seen in a decade. And then, at 7 months, the ultrasound revealed another daughter. The marriage survived, but something in the chief's eyes had died that day.
Now time was running out, and Chief Adeleke had decided to try a different approach. Williams found Chioma 3 weeks later.
She was selling boiled groundnuts at the Ajegunle traffic stop, her younger siblings Michael and Blessing beside her, all three of them working the evening rush-hour traffic like every day for the past 6 months since their mother's death. Their father had died when Chioma was 16, crushed under falling palm trees during a harvesting accident. Their mother had held the family together for 4 more years through pepper soup sales and laundry jobs before malaria and exhaustion took her in the middle of the night. At 22, Chioma had become mother to a 17-year-old brother who wanted to finish secondary school and a 14-year-old sister who still cried for their mama every night. They lived in one room in Ajegunle, sharing space with 4 other families, a communal bathroom that barely worked, and the constant smell of open sewage from the blocked drains outside. Their rent was 48,000 naira every 3 months, and they were 2 months behind. Their landlord, Alhaji Musa, had made it clear that by the end of the week, either they paid or they packed. When the black Mercedes pulled up to the traffic light and the rear window rolled down, Chioma approached with her tray of groundnuts, reciting the pitch she'd perfected over months. "Fresh groundnuts, madam and sir, good for health, only 200 naira per bag." Williams studied her through the tinted window, dark skin that glowed despite obvious malnutrition, intelligent eyes that tracked everything, posture that remained dignified even while begging, and most importantly, the desperate edge in her voice when a potential customer waved her away. Desperation made people manageable. "How much for all of it?" Williams asked. Chioma blinked, calculating rapidly. She had maybe 15 bags left. 3,000 naira, sir." "Get in the car. I'll give you 50,000. Michael grabbed his sister's arm. "Sis, no, we don't know him." But Chioma was already doing the math. 50,000 would cover 2 months' rent with money left over for food. She looked at Williams' expensive Agbada, the driver in the front seat, the leather interior, and made a choice that would change everything. 3 days later, she stood in Chief Adeleke's study while Williams explained the arrangement. "Chief Adeleke is offering you marriage, a traditional wedding followed by a small registry ceremony. In exchange, you'll receive 2 million naira immediately for your family's needs, another 3 million after the wedding. If you give him a son within the first year, you'll receive 20 million naira and a house in Surulere in your name. You'll never have to sell groundnuts again. Your siblings will go to the best schools. Your family's future will be secured." Chioma stood perfectly still, her mind racing. She'd expected to be offered work as a housemaid, maybe a driver if the man was crazy. Marriage to someone her grandfather's age wasn't on any list she'd imagined. "And if I say no?" Williams smiled. "Then you say no. The chief doesn't force anyone. But before you decide, think about your brother Michael's school fees. Think about your sister Blessing's future. Think about the room you're sharing with strangers in Ajegunle. Think about what your mother would want for you." The mention of her mother hit exactly as Williams intended. Chioma's mother had died exhausted, hands rough from washing other people's clothes, back bent from carrying loads too heavy, dreams buried under daily survival. Would her mother want her to marry an old dying man? No. Would her mother want her children to escape poverty? Absolutely. "Can I think about it?" "You have until tomorrow evening. The chief needs to move quickly. His health situation is delicate." Chioma took the business card Williams offered and went back to Ajegunle. That night she sat with Michael and Blessing in their small corner of the shared room and told them everything. Michael was furious. "You can't marry him, sis. He's old enough to be our grandfather. It's not right." But Blessing, 14 years old and already far too wise about poverty's compromises, asked the question that mattered. "Will we be able to stay in school?" Chioma looked at her sister's hopeful face and knew the answer Williams had been counting on. The next evening she called and said yes. The traditional wedding happened within a week at the Adeleke family compound. Small ceremony, Williams had promised. He'd lied.
All 5 previous wives attended, each dressed to outshine the others, each studying the new bride with calculation in their eyes. The 12 daughters ranged from polite coolness to open hostility. Only the youngest, 18-year-old Chinyue, approached Chioma with something resembling sympathy. "They'll try to break you," Chinyue whispered during the reception, "especially my mother and her sisters. They've been fighting for Daddy's money for years, and now you're another threat."
"I'm not here for money," Chioma said quietly. "That's what makes you dangerous," Chinyue smiled sadly. "You want something they can't understand. You actually need this marriage to survive. That kind of desperation makes you unpredictable." The marriage lasted exactly 19 days before it fell apart. Chief Adeleke had moved Chioma into the east wing of his mansion, a separate apartment from where his other wives lived in their respective quarters. He visited her every evening, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to talk. They never consummated the marriage. The cancer medication had destroyed whatever was left of his vitality, and the chief seemed more interested in conversation than anything physical. "Tell me about your father," he said one evening, sipping the palm wine Chioma had bought from an Ajegunle seller who remembered her father. "He was a palm wine tapper, best in our village before we moved to Lagos. He'd climb those trees before dawn, collect the sap, and by evening he'd have the sweetest palm wine you ever tasted. He used to say that patience and timing were everything. Cut too early, the wine is weak. Cut too late, it's bitter. You have to know exactly when." Chief Adeleke nodded slowly. Wisdom comes from everywhere, even from palm wine tappers. He died doing what he knew. The tree was old, he knew it was risky, but the buyer was paying extra for the quantity. He took the risk for us. Chioma's voice remained steady, but her hands tightened around her glass. "Sometimes I wonder if the money was worth his life. And now you're taking risks for your siblings, marrying an old man for their future." The chief studied her carefully. "Do you hate me?" "I don't know you well enough to hate you, sir. But you hate the situation." "I hate poverty more." The honesty seemed to please him. That night, Chief Adeleke began sharing his actual plan, the one he hadn't told Williams or any of his family. "I'm dying, Chioma. 6 months at most, maybe less. I'll never live to see any child you might carry to term. But if you conceive, if the child is born after my death, and if that child is a son, my will is structured to make him the primary heir. Everything, the hotels, the oil blocks, the real estate portfolio, everything." Chioma's breath caught. "Your daughters will receive generous allowances managed through trusts, comfortable lives, but not control. Control goes to my son if you give birth to my son." "But we haven't, you can't." "There are ways, medical ways. Artificial insemination using samples I've already provided to a private clinic, Dr. Emeka Okonkwo. He specializes in fertility treatments for couples with special circumstances, if you're willing." Chioma should have said no, should have recognized the trap being laid, the complications that would follow. But she thought about Michael's school fees, about Blessing's future, about the 2 million naira already given to them, safely deposited, keeping them fed and housed. She thought about her mother dying tired and her father dying for money that barely lasted a month. "I'll do it," she said. But someone was listening. Someone who'd made it their business to monitor everything the dying chief did. Tolani Adeleke was wife number 3, mother of 4 of the 12 daughters, and the most cunning of all Chief Adeleke's wives. She'd married him 32 years ago when he was just building his empire, when he still had enough energy to father children naturally. She'd been 18 then, daughter of a chief from Ibadan, raised to understand that marriage was strategy and men were resources to be managed. For 32 years, she'd watched him marry younger women, father more daughters, build more wealth. For 32 years, she'd played the long game, waiting for him to die so she could guide her daughters toward inheriting everything. And now, this Ajegunle girl threatened to destroy decades of careful planning. Tolani had bribed one of the housemaids to place a listening device in Chioma's apartment. Not sophisticated technology, just a cheap phone set to record, hidden behind the headbed of the bed. She'd heard everything. The conversation about artificial insemination, the plan for a male heir, the restructured will. She called an emergency meeting with the other wives in her private sitting room that same night. He's planning to give everything to a baby that doesn't even exist yet. Everything we've suffered for, everything we've endured, gone to some child this girl will produce in a laboratory, Tolani said, playing the recording for the others. Wife number 4, Fumilayo, shook her head. But if he's using his own samples, the child would legitimately be his son.
Does that matter? Tolani's voice cut through the room like a machete. We can't let this happen. We've all given him daughters, beautiful, educated daughters who deserve their father's wealth. And now he wants to bypass them for a baby made in a clinic? What are you suggesting? Asked Amara, wife number 5, the one who'd almost produced a son 7 years ago. I'm suggesting we make sure this girl never makes it to that clinic. She's already married him. Fine, let her enjoy being wife number 6, but the moment she tries to get pregnant with his heir, we stop her, whatever it takes. The other wives exchanged glances. They'd competed against each other for years, fought over status and resources and their children's positions, but faced with an outside threat, they found common ground in seconds. How? Fumilayo asked. Tolani smiled. Leave that to me. The next morning, Chioma woke up vomiting, violently, painfully, everything she'd eaten the night before coming back mixed with what looked like blood. The doctors at the private hospital diagnosed severe food poisoning, possibly from contaminated palm wine. She spent 3 days in intensive care while her stomach and intestines repaired themselves from whatever had been mixed into her drink. Chief Adeleke visited every day, bringing Michael and Blessing to see her. He held her hand while she recovered and said nothing about coincidences or suspicion, but his eyes had changed. He'd seen this before. His second wife had lost a pregnancy 28 years ago under similarly mysterious circumstances. His fourth wife had been hospitalized twice during her pregnancies, both times from unexplained illnesses the doctors couldn't quite identify. "When you're better, we'll do this differently," he told Chioma, more carefully. I underestimated how far they'd go. But he'd also underestimated how little time he had left. 2 days after Chioma was discharged from the hospital, Chief Adeleke collapsed during a business meeting. The cancer had spread faster than his doctors predicted. They gave him weeks now, maybe a month. From his hospital bed, he made one final decision. "Get my son," he told Williams. "Get Chidi. It's time." Williams hesitated. "Sir, you haven't spoken to him in 3 years. I know exactly how long it's been. Get him. Tell him I'm dying and I need him to protect something important for me." Chidi Adeleke was the chief's only nephew, son of his younger brother who died in a car accident 15 years ago. Chief Adeleke raised him from age 12, put him through the best schools in London, gave him a position managing the hotel portfolio. And then, 3 years ago, they'd had a fight that split the family down the middle. The fight was about money. It was always about money. Chidi had discovered that 2 of the hotels were being used to launder money for a politician who'd helped Chief Adeleke secure his oil blocks. Chidi threatened to expose the arrangement, believing his uncle was destroying his own legacy with corruption. Chief Adeleke fired him on the spot, cut him out of all business dealings, and told him to never come back. But now, dying and desperate, the chief needed someone he could actually trust, someone smart enough to see through schemes, ruthless enough to fight his wives and daughters, and loyal enough to honor a dying man's last wishes. Chidi arrived at the hospital wearing a tailored suit that couldn't hide how much weight he'd lost. 3 years of exile had been hard on him. He'd started his own business, a small tech investment firm, but nothing that matched the lifestyle he'd grown up expecting. "Uncle," he said, standing at the foot of the hospital bed. Chief Adeleke studied his nephew with the clear eyes of a man who'd accepted his death. "I was wrong to cut you off. The corruption you found, you were right to challenge it. I chose money over integrity, and now I'm paying for it with months of cancer instead of years. You didn't call me here to apologize. No, I called you to ask for help." The chief explained everything,
the marriage to Chioma, the plan for a male heir through artificial insemination, the wives plotting against her, the restructured will that would make his future son the primary heir. You want me to protect your last wife? Chidi's laugh was bitter. The one young enough to be my sister? I want you to protect my last chance on a son. If she conceives, if she carries to term, if the child is born healthy, that boy will inherit everything. But he'll need protection. My wives will try to contest the will. My daughters will claim the artificial insemination invalidates paternity. I need someone smart enough and ruthless enough to fight them all. And what do I get?
20% of everything. Hotels, oil blocks, real estate, everything the boy inherits. You get 20% as his guardian and trustee until he turns 21. Roughly $80 million if the math holds. Chidi was quiet for a long moment. Why should I trust that you've actually changed the will? Chief Adeleke handed him a sealed envelope. Read it yourself. Williams drew it up last week. It's already filed with the probate court. All I need is your signature as the designated guardian. That's how Chidi found himself driving to the Adeleke mansion that evening to meet a girl he'd never seen before, who his uncle had married in desperation, who represented either the greatest opportunity or the most elaborate trap of his life. He found Chioma in the garden, pruning roses that didn't need pruning, clearly trying to stay busy while the mansion hummed with whispers about the chief's hospitalization. Chioma Okafor? She turned, and Chidi felt something unexpected catch in his chest. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional way his uncle's other wives were beautiful, with their expensive makeup and designer clothes. She was beautiful in the way his mother had been beautiful in old photographs before poverty and struggle had worn her down. Natural, unguarded, real. "You must be Chidi," she said. "Your uncle spoke about you. Nothing good, I'm sure. He said you were the only honest person in his life, and that's why he pushed you away. He said people like him can't afford honesty around them. It reminds them of what they've become." Chidi sat down on the garden bench, suddenly exhausted. "He told you about the plan, the insemination, the heir, everything. And you agreed to it?" "I agreed to survive, to give my siblings a chance at life beyond Ajegunle. Your uncle offered me a trade, and I took it." Chioma met his eyes directly. "Judge me if you want. People like you always do." "People like me?" "People who've never had to choose between dignity and dinner." The words hit harder than she probably intended. Chidi had grown up wealthy, yes, but he remembered the stories his father used to tell about growing up poor in their village, about the choices poverty forced on good people. He'd forgotten those stories during his years of privilege. "I'm not here to judge you," he said quietly. "I'm here because my uncle asked me to protect you, to make sure his plan works, to fight his wives and daughters when they try to destroy you. Why would you help me? You barely know him anymore, and you don't know me at all." "Because he's offering me 20% of everything if this works, and because after 3 years of exile I need that money." At least he was honest. Chioma nodded slowly. "Then we understand each other. We're both here for survival." That night they made a plan. Chioma would wait until the chief was stable enough to leave the hospital, then they'd proceed with the insemination at Dr. Okonkwo's clinic. Chidi would handle security, making sure the wives couldn't interfere, and then they'd wait. 9 months of waiting while protecting a pregnancy that would be worth billions. But they'd forgotten something crucial. They'd forgotten that in families built on wealth and betrayal, everyone is always watching, everyone is always planning. And Talani Adeleke was already 10 steps ahead. She'd listened to Chidi's visit through the same device she'd used before. She knew about the 20% deal, she knew about the timeline, and she knew exactly how to destroy everything while making it look like tragic misfortune. The next morning, Chief Adeleke suffered another collapse. This one was worse. His organs were failing faster than the doctors expected. They gave him days, maybe a week. From his hospital bed, barely conscious, he grabbed William's hand and whispered, "Do it now. Get her to the clinic today, before I die. The will requires conception during my lifetime. If she's not pregnant when I die, everything fails." Williams called Chidi. Chidi called Chioma. And 6 hours later, she was lying on an examination table at Dr. Okonkwo's private clinic, while he explained the procedure. "It's relatively simple.
We'll use the samples your husband provided. With your age and health, the success rate should be around 40% on the first attempt. If it doesn't work, we can try again." "We don't have time for again," Chidi said from where he stood against the wall. "My uncle has days left." Dr. Okonkwo nodded and began the procedure. 30 minutes later, it was done. Chioma lay still on the table, trying to process that she might be carrying Chief Adeleke's child, that in 9 months she might give birth to one of the richest babies in Nigeria.
"Rest here for an hour. Then you can go home," the doctor said. "We'll know in 2 weeks if it worked." But Chief Adeleke didn't have 2 weeks. He died 3 days later, surrounded by his 5 wives, 12 daughters, and Chioma, who held his hand while he took his final breath. The funeral was massive. Politicians, business leaders, traditional rulers, all of them coming to pay respects to a man who'd built an empire from palm wine profits and ruthless deal-making. The 5 wives wore matching white lace, each trying to position herself as the primary widow. The daughters gave tearful speeches, and Chioma stood in the back, silent, her hand unconsciously pressing against her stomach, wondering if anything was growing there. 13 days after the insemination, 14 days after the procedure, she took a pregnancy test in the servants' quarters bathroom where she'd been moved after the funeral. The wives had made it clear that she was no longer welcome in the main house. 2 pink lines. She was pregnant, and she was completely alone in a mansion full of people who'd kill her if they knew. That's when everything changed. That's when Chidi found her in the bathroom, staring at the positive test, and instead of congratulating her or celebrating the $80 million this represented for him, he said something else entirely. "We can't tell anyone yet, not until you're past the first trimester. It's too dangerous. Your uncle is dead. The insemination happened before he died. The will is clear. What's dangerous?" Chidi pulled out his phone and showed her a document. "This is a challenge to the will that Tolani's lawyers filed yesterday. They're claiming the artificial insemination doesn't count as legitimate conception because it wasn't natural. They're arguing that only children conceived through traditional marital relations should inherit. If they find out you're pregnant now, they'll claim you slept with someone else, that the baby isn't the chief's." Chioma felt the bathroom walls closing in. "So what do I do?" "You hide it. Work as a servant. Keep your head down. Don't let anyone suspect. And in 3 months, when you're far enough along that it's clearly from the right time frame, we announce it." 3 months of lying? 3 months of surviving. Chidi's eyes were hard. "This is what you signed up for. This is the trade you made." So, Chioma became a housemaid in the mansion where she'd briefly been a wife. She cleaned floors, washed dishes, served food to the same wives and daughters who had attended her wedding. Tolani made sure to give her the hardest jobs, the most humiliating tasks, testing to see how far the Ajegunle girl could be pushed. But Chioma had grown up poor. She knew how to bend without breaking. She scrubbed toilets and served tea and kept her mouth shut while the pregnancy grew inside her, invisible under loose clothing. Chidi visited once a week, pretending to check on the property for the estate lawyers, really checking on her. Sometimes he brought prenatal vitamins disguised in vitamin C bottles. Sometimes he brought food that wasn't from the main kitchen, where Tolani controlled everything. Sometimes he just sat with her in the servants' quarters and talked. "Why are you really doing this?" Chioma asked during one of his visits, 6 weeks into the pregnancy. "I told you, 20%. No, you could walk away from the money. You did it before when you fought with your uncle. Why are you staying?" Chidi was quiet for a long moment. "Because watching them tear my uncle apart for his wealth disgusted me, and watching them try to tear you apart for daring to survive disgusts me more. Maybe I'm helping you to spite them. Maybe that's not noble, but it's honest." "Spite is better than nothing," Chioma said softly. That's when their relationship shifted from business arrangement to something neither of them had planned. They didn't fall in love. Love was too complicated, too risky. But they became allies, partners, 2 people trapped in the same cage, working together to survive the lions circling outside. And somewhere in those quiet conversations in the servants' quarters, while Chioma's belly slowly grew and Chidi brought her vitamins and safe food, something else started growing too, something that would complicate everything even further.
8 weeks into the pregnancy, Chinwei, the youngest daughter, figured it out. She'd been watching Chioma carefully, partly out of sympathy, partly out of curiosity about what happened to the girl who'd briefly been her stepmother. She noticed the loose clothing, the way she refused certain foods, the time she rushed to the bathroom early in the morning. Chinwei cornered her in the laundry room one afternoon when no one else was around. "You're pregnant," she said, not a question.
Chioma's hands stilled on the sheets she was folding. "I don't know what—" "Don't lie to me. I'm 18, not stupid. You're pregnant with my father's baby, and you're hiding it because my mother and her allies will try to hurt you if they find out." There was no point denying it. Chioma nodded slowly. "Does Chidi know?" Another nod. Chinwei processed this for a moment. "I can help. I can cover for you. Make sure my mother doesn't suspect anything. But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "When the baby is born, if it's a boy, if he inherits everything like Daddy wanted, you'll make sure my mother and the others don't get completely cut off. They're awful, I know, but they're still my family. Promise me you'll make sure they're taken care of." It was a reasonable request from someone stuck in an impossible position. Chioma agreed. From that day forward, Chinwei became their secret ally. She'd spill drinks to distract her mother when Chioma looked too sick. She'd volunteer to inspect the servants' quarters so Talani wouldn't. She'd feed false information about Chioma seeming depressed and broken, reinforcing the image of a defeated girl who posed no threat. But 10 weeks into the pregnancy, Talani's patience ran out. She'd been waiting for Chioma to try something, to make a move toward the clinic or the lawyers, anything that would justify having her removed from the property. But the girl just kept cleaning and serving and acting like a servant, and it was driving Talani crazy. "She's up to something," Talani told Amara and Fumilayo during one of their private meetings. "She's too quiet, too accepting. Girls from Ajegunle don't just fold this easily." "Maybe she's given up," Amara suggested. "Maybe she realized she can't fight all of us." "Or maybe she's pregnant," Fumilayo said quietly. The room went silent. "How?" Talani demanded. "The chief died before anything could happen between them." "What about the clinic? What if the insemination worked before he died?" Talani stood up, pacing. "If she's pregnant, we need to know now, before it's too late to do something about it." That night, they arranged for Chioma's food to be drugged. Not enough to harm her, obviously, just enough to make her sleep deeply while they searched her room in the servants' quarters. They found the prenatal vitamins hidden in the vitamin C bottle. They found the pregnancy test carefully wrapped and hidden under her mattress, and they found Chidi's notes about timing, about waiting until the second trimester, about the legal arguments they'd used to prove paternity. Talani held the pregnancy test up to the light, her hands shaking with rage. "How far along?" Chinwei checked the dates on Chidi's notes. 10, maybe 11 weeks, past the danger zone for early miscarriage. If we want to stop this, we need to act fast. "We can't just poison her," Fumilayo said nervously. "That would be murder. We'd go to prison." "We don't need to poison her." Talani's smile was cold. "We just need to make her leave, make her so scared, so broken that she runs away on her own, and then we'll make sure everyone knows she abandoned the pregnancy, that she was never really committed to honoring the chief's wishes. Her own actions will invalidate any claim." They spent the rest of the night planning their campaign of terror. It started small. Chioma's belongings would go missing. Her food would be contaminated with things that wouldn't hurt the baby, but would make her sick enough to be miserable. The other servants would be instructed to exclude her, to make her feel isolated and alone. But Talani underestimated 2 things. First, she underestimated how much poverty had already taught Chioma to endurance. Girls from Ajegunle didn't break easily. They bent, they adapted, they survived. And second, she underestimated Chidi. When he arrived for his weekly visit and found Chioma feverish from contaminated food, bruises on her arms from being shoved by another servant, her few possessions destroyed, he made a decision that changed everything. "Pack your things, you're leaving." "If I leave, they win. The will requires the baby to be born." "It doesn't require you to die trying to protect it." Chidi pulled out his phone. "I have a house in Lekki, small, private, secure. You'll stay there for the rest of the pregnancy. I'll hire security, private doctor, everything you need." "That'll cost—"
I have enough money to keep you safe for 7 months, and if I don't, I'll borrow it. But you're not staying here. Your $80 million means nothing if you're dead. The words came out harder than he intended. Just pack your things. As Chioma gathered her few belongings, Chinwe appeared in the doorway. You're really leaving?
Your mother made it impossible to stay. Chinwe pulled out a thick envelope. Then take this. Bank statements showing the payments Daddy made to you, copies of the marriage certificate, medical records from the clinic, everything you'll need to prove the baby is legitimate. I've been collecting it for weeks. Why are you helping me? Because my father wanted a son, not to hurt his daughters, but because it mattered to him, and because you're the only one in this family who hasn't lied to me yet. Chinwe hugged Chioma quickly. Take care of my little brother. Chidi took Chioma to his house in Lekki that night. It was small compared to the mansion, just 3 bedrooms and a living area, but it was clean and safe and hers. He had already arranged for a security guard, an older man named Joseph who'd worked for the Adeleke family for years before retiring. No one gets in without my approval, Joseph told Chioma. Not even the wives, not even the daughters. For the first time in 10 weeks, Chioma slept without fear of being poisoned or pushed downstairs. But when she woke up the next morning and found Chidi asleep in the chair next to her room, having stayed all night to make sure she was safe, she realized something terrifying. She was starting to care about him. Not because of the money, not because of the protection, but because somewhere between the servants' quarters conversations and the prenatal vitamins and the decision to risk his own wealth to keep her alive, he'd become more than an ally. And that was a problem. Because in 3 days, she was going to find out something that would destroy everything they'd carefully built. The ultrasound was scheduled for week 12, standard procedure to check the baby's development. Chidi insisted on coming with her to Dr. Okonkwo's clinic, partly for security, partly because he'd become invested in this pregnancy in ways he hadn't expected. Dr. Okonkwo spread the cold gel across Chioma's stomach and moved the wand carefully, studying the screen. His expression shifted from routine to confused to something neither of them could read. Is something wrong? Chioma asked, fear making her voice tight. No, nothing's wrong. The baby's healthy. Good heartbeat, developing normally. Dr. Okonkwo paused. But there's something you need to know about the insemination. Chidi leaned forward. What? The samples Chief Adeleke provided, we tested them extensively before the procedure. Standard protocol for artificial insemination. The doctor pulled up records on his computer. The sperm count was extremely low due to his cancer treatment and age. We told him the success rate would be around 40%, but that was optimistic. Realistically, it should have been closer to 15%. But she's pregnant, so it worked, Chidi said. That's just it. The timeline doesn't match. According to the ultrasound measurements, this pregnancy is approximately 12 weeks along. The insemination happened 13 weeks ago, which would be right. But Chief Adeleke's samples had such low motility that conception should have taken several days if it happened at all. This baby was conceived within 24 hours of the procedure. The room went very quiet. What are you saying? Chioma whispered. I'm saying that while it's possible this is Chief Adeleke's biological child, it's also possible that conception occurred through other means around the same time as the procedure. Chidi stood up slowly. Are you accusing her of sleeping with someone? I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm giving you medical facts. This pregnancy happened unusually fast given the quality of the samples used. When the baby is born, I'd strongly recommend a paternity test to confirm biological parentage. They drove back to the Lekki house in complete silence. When they finally spoke, it was Chidi who asked the question that was burning in both their minds. Did you sleep with anyone around that time? Anyone at all? No, I swear to you, no. I was recovering from being poisoned, then we went straight to the clinic. There was no one. Then how? Chioma's voice cracked. I don't know. Maybe it's like he said. Maybe it just happened faster than expected. Maybe your uncle's samples were better than they thought. I don't know, but I didn't sleep with anyone. Chidi wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe her. Because if this baby wasn't the chief's biological child, everything fell apart. The $80 million he'd been promised, the revenge against his uncle's greedy family, the whole plan.
But more than the money, more than the revenge, he realized he wanted to believe her because he'd started to trust her, started to care about her, started to imagine a future where they weren't just allies but something more. "Okay," he said, finally. "I believe you."
Just like that? Just like that. He took her hand. "When the baby is born, we'll do the paternity test. We'll prove it's the chief's child, and until then, we keep going with the plan." But the doubt had been planted, and in a family built on suspicion and greed, doubt was more dangerous than poison. Talani found out about the move to Lekki within 48 hours. Her network of informants was too extensive for Chioma to hide for long, and when she learned that Chidi was protecting the pregnant girl, paying for her security, staying at the house with her, she saw an opportunity. She called an emergency meeting with Williams, the family lawyer. "I want to challenge Chidi's position as guardian in the will. He's clearly compromised. He's moved the girl to his private residence. He's spending money on her protection. There are rumors he's sleeping with her." Williams shook his head. "Unless you have proof of a physical relationship that would invalidate the paternity, Chidi's position is secure. The chief was very specific in his will. Only Chidi can serve as guardian. Then we need to get proof. I want surveillance on that house. I want to know every time he visits, every time he stays overnight, every conversation they have. I want evidence that this baby isn't the chief's biological child." Williams hesitated. "That's expensive and possibly illegal." Talani pulled out her checkbook. "I'll pay whatever it takes, because if we can prove that baby isn't my husband's son, the entire will becomes void, and everything gets divided equally among his legitimate daughters. That's worth any price." The surveillance started the next week. Cameras hidden across the street from the Lekki house, long-range microphones that could pick up conversations through windows, a whole team dedicated to watching Chioma and Chidi's every move. And they found something. Not what Talani was hoping for, but something almost as valuable. 12 weeks into living at the Lekki house, as Chioma entered her second trimester and her pregnancy started showing clearly, Chidi and Chioma had a conversation that the surveillance team recorded in perfect detail. They were sitting in the living room, Chioma with her hands on her growing belly, Chidi reading through legal documents about the will's provisions. "What happens if the baby isn't a boy?" Chioma asked quietly. "What?" Chidi looked up. "What if I'm carrying a girl?" "Then," Chidi put down the documents, "then the estate gets divided among the daughters, and you get a settlement payment. The will specifies 10 million naira for you regardless of the baby's gender. And you get nothing. I get nothing." Chioma was quiet for a moment. "Would you hate me if it's a girl?" "No." The answer came quickly, honestly. 3 months ago, maybe yes, back when this was just about money and revenge. But now I'd be disappointed for different reasons." "What reasons?" "Because I've watched you survive everything they've thrown at you, and I've watched this pregnancy grow despite impossible odds, and I want you to win. I want us to win, not just for the money anymore." That's when Chioma did something that changed everything. She reached out and took his hand, placing it on her belly where the baby was starting to kick. "Feel that?" Chidi felt the small flutter under his palm and something cracked open in his chest. This wasn't about his uncle anymore. This wasn't about $80 million or revenge against greedy family members. This was about a girl who'd survived poverty and poison and betrayal, who was carrying a baby that might save her or destroy her, and who trusted him enough to let him feel her child move. "Chioma," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." But before he could continue, his phone rang. Williams, the lawyer, calling at 11 p.m. Never good news. "Chidi, we have a problem. Talani's filed a motion to have you removed as guardian. She's claiming conflict of interest based on your relationship with Chioma." "What relationship? We're business partners protecting a pregnancy." "She has evidence that you're living together, that you're financially supporting her, that there's an inappropriate relationship developing. The judge wants to hear arguments next week." After he hung up, Chidi explained the situation to Chioma. "They're trying to remove me as guardian. If they succeed, the court will appoint someone neutral, probably someone Talani can bribe or manipulate, and then you'll have no protection at all. So what do? We prove there's no inappropriate relationship. We establish clear boundaries. I move out of this house. I stop staying overnight. I maintain professional distance. For how long?
until the baby is born and the paternity test proves everything. Another 5 months.
5 months felt like forever. 5 months of being alone in this house with just security guards for company. 5 months of facing doctor visits and late-night fears and the constant threat of Talani's schemes without Chidi there to help. But Chioma had survived worse. She'd survived Ajegunle, survived her parents' deaths, survived being wife number 6 to a dying billionaire. She could survive 5 more months. "Okay," she said. "We maintain professional distance." Chidi moved out the next day. He still paid for security, still arranged for doctor visits, still sent money for food and needs, but he didn't stay overnight, didn't sit with her in the evenings, didn't place his hand on her belly to feel the baby kick. The loneliness was crushing, but Chioma had learned long ago that survival meant enduring things that felt impossible. Weeks passed. The pregnancy progressed. Dr. Okonkwo's monthly checkups showed a healthy baby, good development, no complications despite all the stress. And slowly, painfully, Chioma and Chidi maintained their professional distance while both of them felt the absence like missing limbs. Then, at 26 weeks pregnant, Chioma went into early labor. It started as cramping during the night. She ignored it at first, thinking it was the normal discomfort of pregnancy. But when the cramping turned to contractions and she felt wetness between her legs, she knew something was terribly wrong. Joseph, the security guard, found her collapsed in the bathroom at 3 a.m. and called Chidi immediately. "She's bleeding. Contractions every 5 minutes. The baby's coming too early." Chidi made it to the house in 15 minutes, breaking every traffic law in Lagos. He found Chioma curled on the bathroom floor, terrified and in pain, bleeding in a way that meant the pregnancy might be ending. "Don't let me lose this baby. Please, it's all I have left." They got her to Dr. Okonkwo's clinic, where he immediately started treatment to stop the labor. Medications to calm the contractions, fluids to support her blood pressure, an ultrasound to check the baby's condition. The baby is still alive. Heartbeat is strong, but she's in preterm labor. If we can't stop it, the baby will be born at 26 weeks. That's survivable, but extremely risky. We need to buy more time. For the next 3 days, Chioma lay in the clinic's private room while doctors fought to keep her pregnancy going. Chidi stayed the entire time, ignoring Williams's calls about maintaining professional distance, ignoring the risk to his guardianship, ignoring everything except the girl in the hospital bed who might be losing everything she'd fought for. On the 3rd day, the contractions finally stopped. The bleeding slowed. Dr. Okonkwo cautiously declared that the crisis had passed. But you're on strict bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. No stress, no standing for long periods. Someone needs to be with you 24 hours a day to make sure you don't go into labor again. Chidi didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." "That'll destroy your guardianship case," Chioma said weakly from the bed. "I don't care. Professional distance nearly cost you this baby, nearly cost you your life. I'm not making that mistake again." So he moved back into the Leckie house, back into the role of protector and friend and something more that neither of them had named yet. And when Talani's lawyers filed another motion citing evidence of him staying at the house overnight, Chidi told Williams to let them. "If the choice is between protecting her and protecting my guardianship, I choose her every time." The court hearing happened when Chioma was 30 weeks pregnant, clearly showing, unable to attend in person. Chidi appeared before the judge with Williams and faced Talani's legal team. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Mr. Adeleke has developed a personal relationship with Mrs. Adeleke that compromises his ability to serve as impartial guardian. He's living with her, supporting her financially. There are credible questions about the paternity of the child she's carrying." The judge looked at Chidi. "How do you respond?" "I'm protecting a woman who's been poisoned, assaulted, and driven into early labor by people who want to see her dead. Yes, I'm living in the same house. Yes, I'm supporting her financially, because if I don't, the baby my uncle wanted to ensure his legacy will die before it's born. Is that what this court wants? To remove the one person keeping her alive just to maintain appearances of impartiality? The paternity questions will be resolved by DNA testing after the birth. Until then, the only question that matters is whether this baby survives, and that requires me to protect its mother.
The judge was quiet for a long moment, studying documents, studying Chidi's face, probably calculating the legal complications of every decision.
I'm going to allow Mr. Adeleke to remain as guardian, with conditions. A court-appointed monitor will visit the residence weekly to ensure appropriate boundaries are maintained. After the birth, immediate DNA testing to confirm paternity. If the child is not biologically Chief Adeleke's son, this guardianship and all related inheritance provisions become void. Understood? Understood, Your Honor. Chidi drove back to the Leke house and told Chioma the outcome. So we have 10 more weeks. 10 weeks to get you to full term, get the baby safely delivered, and prove through DNA that he's the chief's biological son. And if the DNA test says otherwise? Then we've already lost everything, and the past 7 months have been a beautiful disaster. Chioma touched her belly where the baby was kicking strongly now, almost violently, as if he knew how much depended on his arrival. I didn't sleep with anyone else, she said for the 100th time. I know, I believe you. But what if the DNA test says, then we'll figure it out, together. Chidi sat beside her on the couch. Whatever happens, you're not alone anymore. You understand that, right? Even if this all falls apart, even if there's no inheritance, even if everything goes to hell, you're not alone. That night, while Chioma slept, Chidi sat in the living room thinking about how completely his life had changed. 7 months ago, he'd been a bitter, exiled nephew looking for revenge and money. Now he was a man sitting in his own living room at 3 a.m., listening to a pregnant woman breathe in the next room, terrified that she might go into early labor again, terrified that the DNA test might destroy everything, terrified that he'd fallen in love with someone whose entire existence in his life was based on business and survival and his dead uncle's desperate plan. The next 10 weeks passed in a blur of doctor visits, court-appointed monitor check-ins, and Talani's escalating attempts to find evidence of wrongdoing. But Chioma made it to full term, 39 weeks, ready to deliver. Labor started on a Tuesday morning, gentle contractions that built slowly throughout the day. Chidi drove her to Dr. Okonkwo's clinic, where a private delivery room had been prepared. Williams was there with legal documents. The court-appointed monitor was there to ensure everything was properly witnessed, and 15 hours later, Chioma gave birth to a 7-pound baby boy. He came out screaming, healthy lungs, good color, absolutely perfect. Dr. Okonkwo placed him on Chioma's chest while she cried, and for one perfect moment, none of the complications mattered. She'd done it. She'd survived and brought this baby into the world. Does he have a name? Dr. Okonkwo asked. Chioma looked at Chidi, who stood beside the bed looking at the baby with an expression she couldn't quite read. Oladapo, after his father. Oladapo Chukwuemeka Adeleke. Williams pulled out the paternity testing kit, apologizing even as he did it. The court requires immediate testing. I'm sorry. They swabbed the baby's mouth, collected samples, sent them to the lab with express processing. Results in 72 hours. For 3 days, Chioma stayed in the clinic's recovery room with baby Oladapo, feeding him, holding him, falling completely in love while the entire inheritance hung in the balance, waiting for science to confirm what her heart already knew. Chidi stayed too, sleeping in the chair beside her bed, watching her with the baby, falling into his own complications. On the 3rd day, Dr. Okonkwo came in with the sealed results envelope. Before I open this, I want you both to know that regardless of what it says, this baby is healthy and loved. The biology doesn't change that. Just open it, Chidi said. Dr. Okonkwo broke the seal and read the results. His expression shifted from neutral to confused to something close to shock. The DNA test confirms with 99.9% certainty that baby Oladapo is the biological son of Chief Oladapo Adeleke. The room exhaled collectively. Chioma started crying, relief and exhaustion and joy all mixed together. Chidi sat down heavily, processing that the gamble had paid off, that the inheritance was secured, that everything they'd fought for had actually worked. But Dr. Okonkwo wasn't finished.
However, there's something unusual in the results. The DNA shows Chief Adeleke as the biological father, but the genetic markers also indicate an extremely rare occurrence. The conception happened through artificial insemination, as we documented, but the specific sample used had abnormally high viability despite overall low sperm count. Essentially, this pregnancy succeeded against medical probability. It was a 1 in a million chance that worked. "So the baby is definitely the chief's son?" Williams asked. "Definitely, and legally. Any challenge to paternity will fail. This child is Chief Oladapo Adeleke's biological heir."
Williams immediately pulled out his phone to notify the probate court. As of this moment, with paternity confirmed, baby Oladapo becomes primary heir to the Adeleke estate under the terms of Chief Adeleke's will. All inheritance provisions are now in effect, which meant Chioma had just become the mother of one of the richest babies in Nigeria, and Chidi had just secured 20% of everything, roughly $80 million, as guardian and trustee. They should have been celebrating, should have been planning for the future, for the legal battle still ahead with Tolani and the daughters, for managing the estate. Instead, Chioma looked at Chidi and asked the question that had been building for months. "Now what?" "What do you mean?" "You got what you wanted, the money, the guardianship, the revenge against your uncle's greedy family. So now what? Do you disappear back to your life and manage everything from a distance? Do you stay involved? What are we to each other now that the crisis is over?" Chidi looked at her holding baby Oladapo, this girl from Ajegunle, who'd survived everything poverty and wealth could throw at her, who'd carried his uncle's son to term against impossible odds, who'd become the most important person in his life without either of them planning it. "I don't know," he said honestly. "This started as a business arrangement, but somewhere between the servants' quarters and the early labor and the past 10 weeks of bed rest, it became something else. I don't have a name for it yet." "I don't need a name. I just need to know if you're staying." "I'm staying. Not just for the guardianship, not just for the money. I'm staying because—" But before he could finish, Williams interrupted with news that changed everything again. The probate court just received a filing from Tolani's lawyers. They're challenging the entire will on the grounds that Chief Adeleke was mentally incompetent when he made the changes. They have medical experts prepared to testify that the cancer medication affected his judgment. They're claiming the artificial insemination plan and the guardianship arrangement are evidence of diminished capacity. "Can they do that?" Chioma asked, instinctively pulling the baby closer. "They can try. It'll take months to resolve, maybe years, and until it's settled, all inheritance distributions are frozen. The estate will pay for basic maintenance of the properties, but no large distributions, no access to the majority of the wealth." Chidi processed this information quickly. "So I don't get my 20%? "Not until the competency challenge is resolved." "And Chioma?" "The will provides a monthly allowance for her and the baby during probate, enough to live comfortably but not extravagantly. The house in Surulere won't transfer until the case is settled. The 20 million naira payment is frozen." Chioma laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "So I survived all of this, gave birth to the heir everyone wanted, and I still don't get security?" "You get survival. The monthly allowance will keep you housed and fed, but the real wealth stays locked until we prove the chief was competent when he made his decisions." "How long?" "Best case, 2 years. Worst case, 5 or more." 5 years of legal battles, 5 years of living in limbo, 5 years of Tolani and the daughters fighting to overturn everything. After Williams left, Chidi sat beside Chioma's bed while she fed baby Oladapo. "I could walk away," he said quietly. "The guardianship won't pay anything until probate resolves. I could go back to my tech firm, rebuild my life, come back when the legal battles are over. But you won't. Not a question." "No, I won't." "Why?" "Because somewhere in the past 9 months, this stopped being about my uncle's money and started being about you, about us, about this baby who shouldn't exist but does." He reached out and touched baby Oladapo's tiny hand, watching the baby's fingers curl around his. "I can't walk away from this, from you."
Even though there's no money yet? Even though it might be years? Even though. That's when Chioma did something that surprised both of them. She reached out with her free hand and pulled him closer. Then stay, not as the guardian, not as the business partner, just stay. And he did. What happens next? What happens when Tolani discovers that the DNA test confirmed paternity? What happens when she realizes legal challenges are her only option left? What happens when she decides that if she can't have the money, no one will? What happens when Chioma and Chidi try to build something real from a relationship that started in desperation and business? What happens when the baby who was supposed to solve everything becomes the target of even more elaborate schemes?
What happens when Michael and Blessing, Chioma's siblings who've been living well on the initial payments, discover that their sister's security is threatened again? What happens when they decide to help in ways that might make everything worse? And most importantly, what happens when Chioma realizes that the biggest threat to her son isn't Tolani or the daughters or the legal challenges, but something else entirely? Something that's been hiding in plain sight since the beginning. Something that Dr. Okonkwo mentioned in passing, but nobody really thought about. The 1 in a million chance that shouldn't have worked, but did. The abnormally high viability in samples that should have been worthless. The timing that was too perfect, the pregnancy that succeeded when all the medical science said it shouldn't. What if someone made sure it worked? What if the artificial insemination wasn't as random as everyone believed? What if there was one more player in this game, someone who's been watching from the shadows the entire time, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal themselves? If you enjoy thrilling African stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell and tell us where you are watching from. Your support means the world to us. Because this story isn't over, not even close. The baby has been born, the paternity confirmed, but the real battle for the Adeleke fortune is just beginning. And in a family built on betrayal and greed, the most dangerous secrets are the ones nobody thought to question. Who really wanted Chief Adeleke to have a son? Who benefited most from this pregnancy succeeding? And what happens when Chioma discovers that the one person she's trusted completely might be the one person she should have feared all along? Find out in Part 2, where alliances shatter, secrets explode, and the true cost of survival becomes clear. Because in Lagos, nothing is ever as simple as it seems, and in the Adeleke family, every answer just reveals more dangerous questions.